So what comes next in this contentious relationship? Former Canadian Ambassador Guy Saint-Jacques joins us now. Mr. Saint-Jacques, thanks for joining us. Before the Meng Wanzhou arrest, relations with China were in what seemed like a much better place. There was talk about starting free trade negotiations, and the Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping had agreed to annual bilateral meetings. Why did the relationship sour so quickly?
Well, I would say that, in fact, the relationship started to go downhill because you will recall that Mr. Trudeau went to Beijing in December 2017, supposedly to launch officially the free trade negotiations, but the Chinese didn't agree to the wording of the press communique, and so it was a missed opportunity. But after that, I would say, the arrest of Meng Wanzhou and the subsequent arrest of the two Michaels really changed the views of the Canadian public and the government on what was really happening in China. And I think many people discover the aggressive side of China, China that does not hesitate to act as a bully to punish you if you do something that you don't like. And I think it was just a question of time before we arrived to that point, because there had been many yellow lights flashing in Beijing, and I think the government should have been alert to those much earlier.
Yeah, Steph, I remember going on that trip that Mr. Saint-Jacques mentioned, and I believe it was Chrystia Freeland, who was then the International Trade Minister, brought a jar full of canola because that was kind of a big sticking point in the relationship, was whether China would accept our canola. So there's a big economic component to this, and there are consequences to us in terms of our ability to export a lot of agricultural products into China. Talk to me about how that could be adversely affected by this diplomatic row we have going on continuously.
So, we've seen, of course, China play an element of hostage diplomacy, right? Where that's sort of how they've begun to act on the world stage. But they've been doing that from an economic standpoint for quite some time, right? Deciding on a whim, perhaps, that they're going to cut off their imports of product X or product Y. Sometimes, putting forward scientific evidence, sometimes dancing around that. And so I think that it's a problem that has bedeviled governments even before the Trudeau Liberals, where they all take the message, we're going to be tough on China, we're going to stand up for human rights, but we need that market, right? Can you, to borrow an expression, walk and chew gum at the same time on this file? It's becoming increasingly notable that perhaps, no, you can't. And that leaves the Trudeau government trying to find new markets. The problem becomes, what market can take as much canola as China used to be able to take?
It's not Cambodia or Thailand.
Exactly that.
Exactly.
We had blinders on. This government had blinders on. Right from the get-go, they were allowing Canadian companies, high technology, military technology, going to China, no national security reviews. They were the hostage of the Canada-China Business Council. Whatever they wanted to do, that was fine with them. The Canadian public was way ahead of this government. They recognized long before the Meng Wanzhou and the rest of the two Michaels that China was something we had to really reconsider this relationship. And after the arrests of the two Michaels, the government was still very slow in doing anything about it. It took the United States and Australia and other allies who said, we are going to do something about China, you better join us. And so we're now playing catch up with our allies.
Yeah, you and Steve Chase have been writing about this extensively at the Globe for a couple of years. Do you think it's kind of catching on? And is there, the conventional thinking is foreign relations don't generally affect people's voting preference. Is this different this time? Do you think people are more concerned about this?
Foreign affairs, you're right, they do not normally affect relations. So I think I think the public does make a decision on this, but it doesn't trump like pocketbook issues,
sure,
right?
Right, yeah, fair enough. Mr. Saint-Jacques, President Xi is probably the most authoritarian leader China has seen since Mao. How much of China's belligerence, including that towards Canada that we're seeing right now, do you think can be attributed to him personally?
Well, I think it's true that he is it can be closely associated with this attitude because he is the one, once he came to power, who ordered the Chinese diplomats to be a lot more aggressive, to push back on any criticism of China. He is on a mission, and he is talking about this China dream, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese state. He is a person who is vindicative, revengeful, and I think all this shows that China is in immature power and insecure. And in fact, if you watch what he said at the 20th Party Congress in October, he doesn't want to change the way he is going forward, but he was forced to make a huge change in his attitude towards the COVID pandemic. And in fact, this will have a huge impact on China as the number of cases keep increasing, and this will continue to have a big impact on the economy. And the Chinese economy is not doing well. Right. In fact, it's something that she has to watch because it could come back to haunt him.
Right. Really quickly, Steph, I want to ask you about these allegations of election interference. We've had denials from Elections Canada. The Prime Minister claims he wasn't briefed on this claim that there had been money funneled towards 11 campaigns in 2019. Do you think Canadians can still have faith that our elections are going to be conducted fairly?
Canadians are the ones who cast the ballot at the end of the day. So the question becomes their homework, their due diligence, their trust in the system. Do they believe in the vote? There's a line that the government uses a lot about how the outcome of the election wasn't affected. And so as though that's supposed to give Canadians some sort of relief, well, whatever happened, it didn't matter because the vote itself was secure.
But moving forward, though, we could have another election in, who knows, maybe this year.
And so what are those safeguards, right? What are the things that the government thinks it needs to put in place based on, the experience or even the whisper campaigns of this experience? Right? In order to make sure that people have faith in the democratic system, because if they can't trust their vote, will they vote?
Right. Bob, do you buy that denial from the government that they didn't know about this?
No, I don't. Look, the government, I think, is right to say that there's no evidence that there was Chinese state money going, because they don't have that evidence. But there was election interference, and anybody who talks to anybody in these large Chinese Canadian communities will say that there's WeChat going on. They are trying to influence the election campaign. The government is slow to trying to deal with this, but our agencies are now, they're briefing members of Parliament what to watch for. I think, frankly, Glenn, the more it can be transparent, the more the government can be transparent, the better our democracy will be, and the better we'll be able to judge candidates and whether there may be influence operations.